The Cosmic Wind is a tiny little machine, just 16 feet 8 inches long and knee-high to the proverbial grasshopper. But what a performer! Just about 100 horsepower from the Continental O200A engine, and it gives a maximum speed of about 95 miles an hour. But it was conceived for the then new class of so-called Formula 1 air racing. Tony LeVier, a Lockheed test pilot, was the man behind the Cosmic Wind. He wanted a new racer to compete in the so-called Goodyear Formula 1 class. And he came up with the Cosmic Wind, which was first raced in 1947. He was helped in his endeavours by a design and building team drawn from the staff of Lockheed. This is the only one still flying. Just 6 in total were produced. This is one of the original 3 built by LeVier Associates, and it's been part of the British scene for ages. It was imported into Britain by the great Norman Jones, one of the founding fathers of the Tiger Club, in 1961, and some great names flew it in displays, the likes of Peter Phillips and the much missed, similarly, Neil Williams. But it carried on in racing, and in 1964, in the hands of Dennis Hartis, it won the King's Cup Air Race and that year's British Air Racing Championship. While it wasn't conceived for aerobatics, it has always been superb aerobatic mounts, and Neil Williams flew it in the 1964 World Aerobatic Championships in Bilbao, and he performed very well there despite the aircraft's lack of ultimate suitability for that job. It's been rebuilt 7 times. To the competitor in British Formula 1 air racing during the 1970s. Pete Kinsey, the chief pilot of the fighter collection, bought it in 1984. We see it here cavorting in the background while the Piper L4 performs in front of us. In fact, the L4 just landing, the military version of the J3 Cub, used for artillery spotting, medical evacuation duties, liaison and light transport in the field. One we saw displayed in a 160 package with the tail wheel raised in the hands of Dave Fullerton was built in 1942 in the colours of an L4 in the 456th Parachute Field Artillery Battalion, part of the US 82nd Airborne Division, with which it was one of the first 2 grasshoppers to operate in Normandy after D-Day.
Camera back.
Taxiing out.
Right, come sit back over here.
see coming towards the end of its display really is an aeroplane that captures the imagination.
Greg, do you want to come over and sit back over here again? Are you okay where you are? Take one still, just sit there where you are really.
We saw there a demonstration of the aircraft's very rapid rate of roll, an extremely responsive handler. And, well, as I mentioned earlier, it was a new display pilot today giving his first public demonstration of this aeroplane. Richard Grace, the son of Carolyn, we've seen both of them over the years flying the family two-seat Spitfire. And Richard also a member of the trick team alongside Dave Fulliston, who was flying the Cub. Richard told me earlier that he was really taken by this aeroplane from an early age. Meanwhile, the Steerman and Beaver running in to start their display. That people might think that he grew up just for two flying Spitfire. In fact, it was Cosmic with that really was his dream. Thanks to Pete Kinsey, he has now achieved that. He says the aircraft is simply fantastic. But now on the PT-17 Cadet, the military Steerman, leading with the HC-2 Beaver, and these, my goodness, two fantastic aircraft with fantastic radiators. Of the Cadet, 220 horsepower continental R670. The Beaver with a 450 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R981 here. Model 75. It was a private venture at the outset on the part of the Steerman Aircraft Company, hence the Steerman moniker that's most popularly applied to these aeroplanes. That company based in Wichita in Kansas, acquired by Boeing in 1934. It's all metal fuselage with wooden wings, the whole thing fabric covered. These were built particularly during wartime when it became the standard primary trainer with the US forces and with the Royal Canadian Air Force. To give you an idea, in 1940 alone, over 3,500 were built. Boeing says that a total of just over 8,500 were built between 1936 and the end of production in 44, but it adds that it reckons that the equivalent of 2,000 more Steermans have been built out of spares. The Cadet was the mainstay of the so-called Arnold scheme initiated by US Army Air Corps General Hap Arnold in the early war years. It was one of a number of training schemes set up to train British Commonwealth pilots outside the UK and thus out of the way of potential enemy attacks. This aircraft with the Lycoming engine and PT-17s carried out the primary training element from 6 bases around the US. Those students then went on to do their basic training on the Vultee BT-13, BT-15 Valiant and the advanced stage of the American T-6 Texan. Here, the Havilland Canada Beaver is a very versatile rugged aeroplane as it might be, because it was in the immediate post-war period that de Havilland Canada hit upon producing a very versatile utility aeroplane, one that would be able to operate as a land plane, as a float plane, or even on skis with minimal modification, a big high-lift wing to give it good short takeoff and landing capabilities in conjunction with the powerful R985 engine. The US Army was an early customer. They saw early operational usage in the Korean War from 1951 onwards. Served in all major theatres with US forces. In fact, the US Army Beaver was shot down over the so-called demilitarized zone in Korea in 1955 with the loss of 2 crew. They were used in Vietnam by the US Army and Air America, and also in the European theatre, not least with the Berlin Brigade operating from Tempelhof Airport in West Berlin. But of course, over here, it's with the British Army Air Corps that the type is best remembered. They were hugely active in support of the British Army around the world. They served in Borneo, the Asian Protectorate, and particularly in Northern Ireland. And the Army Air Corps says it became the Army's primary surveillance platform in Northern Ireland, and helped avert many terrorist initiatives. The Steerman leading the pair into land, the 1942 vintage example, based at Duxford with gold snaffle operations, and flown here by their chief pilot Mark Linney, who used, of course, to fly the F-86A Sabre so beautifully. Following it, the relatively recently restored Beaver of the Aircraft Restoration Company, an ex-Army Air Corps example, built in 1961, more recently rebuilt by ARC as a purely civilian Beaver with a very luxurious rear cabin that even incorporates a sound system for in-flight entertainment. First flew again in 2011, and here it is about to demonstrate its short landing characteristics in the hands of a pilot giving his first public flying display here today, Martin Overall, who's the chief engineer of Historic Flying Limited, based here at Duxford. With him in the cockpit was Dave Ratcliffe. Getting airborne now, the consolidated PDY-5A Kathleen.